Imagine a scenario where taking action destroys the fabric of your society, and doing nothing destroys it just as thoroughly. You are trapped in a system where every available physical choice yields a catastrophic result. The Bhagavad Gita is frequently categorized as a theological scripture. In practice, it operates as a rigorous manual for crisis intervention, addressing the universal paradox of how an agent must function when the system around them is actively collapsing. The text opens on a battlefield. The protagonist, Arjuna, is a commanding general facing this exact paradox. His limbs fail, his bow drops from his hands, and his mind begins to unravel. The dialogue that follows bypasses the physical variables of the war. It solves the crisis by reprogramming how the human mind processes reality. Arjuna's paralysis in the first chapter stems from a state of flawless, inescapable logical gridlock. Path A involves executing his ditty. He fights. Because the opposing army is comprised of his own teachers and family members, fighting means participating in a structurally violent system, destroying his kinship lines and accruing karmic debt. Path B involves withdrawal. He walks away. But abandoning his post ensures the collapse of the social order and constitutes a failure of his structural duty, his dharma. Both paths terminate in ruin. Verse 1.36 outlines this exact unresolvable equation. Sin will cling to us if we kill these aggressors. In the material world, the math fails. When an external system reaches total gridlock, physical action cannot solve the equation. The only way out is to alter the internal mechanism the agent uses to perceive the stakes. Krishna's first step in resolving this paralysis is establishing a new baseline axiom. He separates the observer from the environment to redefine the parameters of life and identity. He defines the first half of existence as sharira, the material body and physical world. This state is transient and in constant flux. He then isolates the second half, the Atman. This core observing consciousness is absolute, unchanging, and impervious to external forces. Verse 2.16 formalizes this as a mathematical proof. The unreal has no true existence, and the real never ceases to be. This axiom deletes the absolute permanence of death. Violence on a battlefield alters transient material variables, leaving the core reality of the agent untouched. But this creates an immediate logical counterargument. If the physical world is temporary and secondary, why not withdraw from the system entirely? Chapter 3 refutes this by pointing out a harsh biological reality. Absolute inaction is physically impossible. Nature, or prakriti, is built on underlying variables known as gunas. These forces mandate constant kinetic movement and systemic participation. As verse 3.5 explicitly states, no one can remain actionless even for a moment. Existence itself requires kinetic output. Because absolute withdrawal is an illusion, the agent is forced to execute actions within the compromised system. There is no escape hatch. If action is mandatory, we have to identify the exact mechanism that causes the psychological suffering paralyzing Arjuna on the chariot. Verses 2.62 and 2.63 map this out as a sequential cognitive feedback loop. It begins with sensory contemplation. Attention fixes on an object. That sustained attention reads sangha, attachment. Attachment mutates into a demand for acquisition, generating kama, desire. When a chaotic world inevitably frustrates that desire, the resulting friction yields krodha, anger. Anger rapidly distorts perception, causing moha, delusion. Delusion leads to the failure of memory, which results in buddhanasha, total intellectual collapse. The root of moral destruction lies in the cognitive fixation on sensory objects, rather than the physical execution of duty. To survive the system, the text introduces a specific behavioral intervention: action without desire. Verse 2.47 breaks this down as a literal algorithm for human operation. First, the agent must claim total agency over the execution of the duty itself, the input. Simultaneously, they must explicitly relinquish any psychological dependence on the specific result, the output. This decoupling mechanism acts as a firewall. It allows the machine to run without engaging the gears of attachment, desire, and anger. An agent can operate at maximum effort in a high-stakes environment without accruing psychological friction, provided they are entirely outcome independent. Watch what happens when we apply this algorithm back to Arjuna's starting gridlock on the battlefield. By stripping away the desire for victory and the fear of defeat, the mechanism that generates karmic debt is disabled. Arjuna can now perform his structural duty. He can fight without moral destruction. Path A reroutes through detached execution. The equation solves itself. The operator's consciousness uncouples from external chaos, rendering the physical state of the war a secondary variable. The psychological end state achieved by this process is the sthita prajna, the agent of steady wisdom. Verses 255 through 270 describe a steady mind that processes incoming chaos the way an ocean receives rivers. It absorbs continuous influxes of pressure without ever overflowing, maintaining equilibrium at its center. This renders the ascetic impulse and the active life compatible. You do not need to choose between spiritual clarity and material participation. Renunciation manifests as the mastery of high-stakes action through the abandonment of psychological outcome dependency. Master the action by letting go of the result.